So obviously modeling a shoe with T-splines in Fusion is not a problem. So you can first create your T-spline and just edit it. And once you're done with the T-spline, you end up obviously with a NURB surface body. And then you can, as the user did here, thicken this to, or copy, thicken things, and you end up with a solid model. And then going on further, you can, add a sole to that shoe. And that's all, quite possible within Fusion. But where you run into limitations is if that needs to adhere to a shoe last. And this looks like it was a quad model at some point, a quad mesh model at some point in time, and now it's highly subdivided and triangulated. But the original T-spline adheres to it somewhat, and there are tools in Fusion to maybe improve that, but it's all very manual. For example, what I mean by that is if I want points to snap to that mesh, I can use the pull functionality, and that pulls vertices, or in this case the surface points of the T-spline down to that mesh. But we can see that our geometry is pretty coarse in this area, so the shape is a little smaller than our shoe last. And that is particularly the case here in areas where I don't have enough polygons, but the curvature of the underlying mesh is quite strong. Here we have enough geometry, but the geometry is very unevenly distributed. So up here, the quads or the rectangles, they should be actually more quadratic than rectangular, and the density increases here to again get a better curvature here, representation that matches the shoe last. And whenever you add geometry, if I would add an edge loop here now, I would have to make sure that that also adheres to the shoe, and either manually model it and pull vertices around, which you can do, right? You can just click on a vertex here, edit the form, and pull this out. And that works quite intuitively. But this the user that created this already did this. If we take a look at this in box view mode, it looks quite uneven in some places. And that later on can create problems when you try to offset the surface that is created from this. It only allows you to offset by a certain amount, and some of these vertices that probably need to be pushed in a little bit. And when you have that much geometry, that many polygons in a model already, that is quite tedious. And then Fusion also does not have a vertex slide, it only has an edge slide. But if in this case you just want to move that vertex along an edge, you can't actually do that in Fusion. You'd have to do that by manually pulling these things around multiple times. So at that point in time, when I have that shoe last, I would take this into Blender, and I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. So you can obviously export a T-spline mesh, and that you need to hide that. You need to hide all other bodies that you don't want to export, and then select save control frame as .obj, and then hide that one. You get the shoe last, and you can also save that as a mesh. And then I've already done that, so I'm now going to go into Blender. Actually, I first go into my File Explorer, and then I'm going to go into Blender. And nope, I'm not going to do that. Cancel, because first I'll delete everything in Blender. And I'm also going to enable a particular plugin that is, or an add-in for Blender, it's Screencast Keys, and that allows you to see whatever keystrokes I use in Blender. So I drag my two meshes that I exported from Fusion into Blender's viewport. Here they are. and they come in that orientation. So I hit the R for rotate, X for x-axis -90, and then Control A to apply that rotation. So if you go to the item tab here, we can see that is quite a large thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my units and set the scale to 0.01 and then change that to millimeters. And that is a much more reasonable dimension for a shoe, I would think. The next thing I'm going to do, if I zoom out, that thing starts vanishing. I'm going to go into view here and change my clip start to 0.1 millimeter and maybe to 2 meters. Okay, so now I can work with it. I could also, if I would use that grid for something, you can go here and change the scale of that grid or the floor grid as well. I don't need that for this modeling exercise. So now here's our mesh. So we have a shoe last and we have our model. So I'm just going to rename those here in my object settings. Shoe last, and then this is our model. And what I'm going to do, I'm also going to go here into the filter settings and enable that select unselect ability. And the shoe last, I do not want to select that shoe last, and not even by accident. So here we have our mesh, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete some edge loops, because it's really the density of polygons here is quite varying. And also looking at the shoe last, we can see if, let's say for example, I apply a subdivision surface modifier, we can see that particularly in that front area, our shoe model does not adhere very well to the shape of that shoe last. So I undo that, and so I'm going to first delete some geometry, and later probably pull some vertices around. And the first edge loop I delete is that, and it's not deleting it, it's dissolving it. And obviously we can see that that mesh now adheres even less to the shape of that shoe last. So I'm also going to completely delete, in this case we'll delete these vertices for the sole, and I select part of it, hit the L key, L for linked, and again delete all the vertices. And I think there are some more shortcuts that I'm not using, but for now that should be okay. And another thing I'm going to enable is in the viewport display in front. So the actual mesh that I want to model with is always going to be in front. So I'm also going to dissolve that edge loop, and I'm now going to go into X-ray mode and go into the side view, and I select that entire edge loop down here and hit G for grab, Z for Z direction, and pull this up quite a bit. And the reason for that is when I later on enable the shrink wrap modifier, that vertices don't snap all the way to the bottom while the others stay up here. So that gives my mesh something to snap to. So what I'm going to do now, I select everything and I enable snapping. That goes with that magnet symbol up here, and I'm also now going to change that to face nearest. And I hit the G key for grab. We can see that the vertices of my input mesh, let me call it that, the mesh that I'm actually modeling with, the vertices snap to that underlying shoe last mesh. Now, of course, if I would export this mesh now, this model would be way too small. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable a modifier because we don't really have enough geometry. So for example, we need a little bit more geometry here to reflect the shoe last. And then we also need generally more geometry so we have a better reflection of that shape. So I'm going to enable the subdivision surface modifier, and level 1 is fine. You can see that here as I increase the number of subdivisions, that mesh becomes denser and denser, but this is dense enough for our purposes at the moment. And we can see that even that denser mesh also does not really follow the shoelace very well. So for that we use another modifier that I named earlier already, that is the shrink wrap modifier, and that doesn't work without selecting a target, and the target would be the shoelace, but I changed that shoelace to unselectable up here, so I can pick on it and it won't do anything at the moment, but I can select it here from that drop down list. So now we can see that our model here adheres very well to the shoelace. So now I can select edge loops, and in Blender the edge slide does not GG is the keyboard shortcut for that, which is very quick to do. And all the changes happen live, so I can really see how my shape changes. And can live see the size of the polygons that are going to be created, which is super nice. So as I said earlier, I needed to move that entire edge loop up here, GZ, to avoid that strange snapping here that we see down there. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just move those up a little bit. All right, that looks better. Okay, so that's good enough for now. So now our message is shrink wrapped to the shoelace, but I need a little bit more geometry here. So GG, I move this forward, Control R, insert an edge loop here, and I do the same thing here. GG, GG, Control R. That looks a little unevenly distributed. GG, GG. Yep, that looks better. I still need more geometry up here. So what I'm going to do is hit the C key for the brush tool, select those, GG, move those all the way up front, and then Control R. Add another edge loop here, and look how that looks like. Oh, that looks nice. Yeah, so I'm probably gonna move that around a little bit. And whenever you hear that double tap, that's just the GG. For edge slide. So now we have more dense geometry here. It would probably not be a bad idea to add more here, so these vertices up front here become more square than rectangular. But that should be it for now. So now what I'm going to do is, does that look okay? No, that doesn't look okay. GG. While I'm doing this, these just do some fine adjustment. That's another tool that is really nice in Fusion, not in Fusion, in Blender. I've asked for it in Fusion many times, but you know, it's the precision with which you can actually move vertices. So without anything, just using the G for grab key, it moves around it. Obviously, because I have snapping enabled up here, it still snaps to the underlying mesh. But if I hit the Shift key, my mouse movement is divided by 10, which allows me to very precisely move my vertices here. All right. Okay, let's. That'll be it for. Hang on. All right. That looks a little bit. That looks. That doesn't look great. Okay, so that is our final mesh, and in order to bake that into the mesh, so to speak, to bake that shape, I'll have to apply those modifiers. Before doing that, this is edit mode. Go into object mode, Shift D that object, and that creates a duplicate here, and that should be the backup. And now we can apply those modifiers, starting with the one at the top, apply. So if I now hit edit, that is the mesh we are going to work with moving forward. So go back into side mode, into side view, and select that entire edge loop down here, go into X-ray mode and hit my brush tool, and I'm going to deselect those edges here. Hit SZ, scale Z to 0 to straighten out all the and flatten these vertices, and then G, Z, and I still have snapping enabled, so I pull this all the way down and it still snaps to my shoelace mesh. So what I'm going to do now here, I'm going to manually adjust GZ, and try to get a nice curve going here. That's what I'm trying to do here right now. So that that looks good enough. It's always good to check your mesh all the way around if that still looks good. Maybe move those a little bit down. Yeah, that looks very nice. So out of X-ray mode. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off snapping, and I'm going to recreate the geometry for the solid. So I select the entire edge loop down here, E for extrude, Z for Z direction, and then I'll just pull this down, doesn't matter how far. Number key 3 to go into face select mode and select that entire edge loop. E for extrude and escape. So escape. So now I have faces laying on top of faces, and I hit Alt S for shrink fatten, and I'm going to shrink those in. What I'm interested in is this loop of faces here, not the one that is currently highlighted. Actually, that one I don't need anymore. So I delete it. I select the face here. I select that face. L, come on. L for linked. X, delete vertices. All right. So now I have that nice loop around here, and I hit the number key 2 for face edge select mode and use a tool that's called grid fill. And wow, man, I got lucky. That already looks exactly like what I need. But if it doesn't, you can adjust this number of spans here, and you can also adjust how that is rotated. This is moving the things, the edges clockwise, and in the other direction it's counterclockwise. But out of the box, this is already exactly what I want. So drop that tool, reselect those edge loops, not that one, those here all the way around, and select loops and select inner region. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to re-enable snapping and hit the G key for grab, and we could see how this, well, okay, I wouldn't jump is maybe not the right description, but how this moved. And now our shoe sole also adheres to adheres to our shoe last. I can probably do a little bit more modeling down here, maybe add an edge loop or so to better reflect that curve, but for the moment that is okay. So with that, we could actually go ahead and export this mesh in Fusion out of Blender as a .obj and go with that back into Fusion if we would want to do that. But there's more that we can do with this in Blender. So first of all, of course, this mesh lays very tightly here on that shoe last. So I can select all and hit Alt S for shrink fatten, and maybe hit the Shift key, and then I can increase the size, maybe not 1 millimeter. We can see that in the upper left corner. We can also give that a precise value, minus 0.5, for example. So that makes it just a tad bigger than our shoe last. What we can do now, we can add a modifier. But before we add a modifier, what we need to do, our original mesh has a crease down here. And in Blender, we can also crease. And I select that edge loop down here. And that's not visible right now, but I'm going to, for demo purposes, apply a, go out of here, hit Control 3, that applies a subdivision surface modifier, and we can see that now that edge has smoothened out. So if I go back into edit mode and select that bottom edge loop and increase the mean crease, we can see that now I can make that a sharp edge. But obviously I don't need that subdivision surface modifier quite yet. So now I'm going to use another modifier, and that is the solidify modifier, and make that like 3 millimeters. 3. And now we have thickened our shoe around the shoe last. And obviously this is a modifier that's parametric, so if we want that 2 millimeters, I can do that as well. And now if I would want to apply a subdivision surface modifier, I need to change something here in my solidify modifier to work with the subdivision surface modifier, and that's an edge data. So increase those two edges, those two here, And now we can see we have nice sharp corners. If we want less sharp corners on the inside and outside, we can lower the value here. That makes these edges less sharp, but I'll set that to 1. And even with the subdivision surface modifier enabled, we get nice crisp edges here. So that is the shoe, but let's say we want the sole. So again, I would in object mode Shift D that to create a copy backup of this, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that one. I don't need it for now, and I'm going to apply this one. This is destructive, meaning that bakes this into a mesh. Now I have a thickened mesh. I cannot change the thickness anymore. Well, that's not entirely true, but you know, you'd have to select the outside and use shrink fatten, and then that would help make that thicker. But what I'm interested in is the sole. I want to create a sole, and I select that edge loop back here and go again to select loops and loop inside. While in edit mode, I hit Shift D to copy the geometry, Escape to keep it in that place. And then I hit the P key and separate that geometry that is still selected out into another object. And that is that other object, and that is the shoe sole. So if I go into the black slash key and isolate it, that is my shoe sole mesh. And now what I can do with that, I'm also going to just apply a solidify modifier and make that maybe 4 millimeters thick. And we can see that thickens it to the top. That is because the surface normals of my faces point upwards, but then I just change that to 1, and now it points downwards. And out of isolation mode, that looks exactly like the sole that I want on my shoe. So I can select both of these meshes and hit Control 3 and apply a subdivision surface modifier, and there we go. Now that still has this faceted look. We can shade that smooth, and shade that smooth, and here's the final shoe model. So a lot of this shoe modeling, in this case, because it has to adhere to a shoe last, I would actually do in Blender. It's a better tool for that. Now again, if there's some point in time where you want to take that back into Fusion, you can. But this helps demonstrate how to do that in Blender. I hope this helps.